Hey, everybody. Great to be with you all again. Thanks for attending our session and taking a little bit of time out of your lunch or whatever it is in whatever part of the world you happen to be in. I am delighted to be here today with Guy. I first came across, or I first got to know of Guy many years ago on the campus at University of New South Wales, where he was described to me as a global technology powerhouse. And it was in the course of reading up for this interview that I really got to understand precisely why those terms were used about him. You know, Guy is obviously is a famous marketing guru, but he's also a serial author. He is a venture capitalist, and he's also an executive fellow at the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. He is a renowned, I think he's so renowned in part because he popularized this concept of evangelism marketing at Apple starting in the 1980s. And when he was part of Apple's original Macintosh team. And for those of us who are in Australia, I think much more well known to us is that he has recently extended this evangelism to Canva, where he's the chief evangelist, and which is obviously having a very large impact given their recent success. He is the author of numerous books: Wise Guy, The Art of the Start 2.0, How to Drive Your Competition Crazy. He is an authority on the subject of marketing, of VC, and of entrepreneurship. He is also the creator. Oh, wow, there it is. I love it. He is also the creator of Guy Kawasaki's Remarkable People podcast. He's a brand ambassador for Mercedes-Benz, and he is a trustee of the Wikimedia Foundation. And I just learned while chatting to him that he is a surfer who claims falsely that Santa Cruz is better than Bondi. So with that only small glitch on his record, I welcome Guy Kawasaki to the call.
You forgot one more very important data point about my credibility, which is I am an adjunct professor for the University of New South Wales. So
Indeed. Well, that's probably why
like
that's why they hold you in such high regard down there, Guy. That finally, that's the final piece of the puzzle down here.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone! I just want to reiterate Sarah's message in your ribbon, in the ribbon at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A and a chat function. Please use the Q&A function for asking questions, so that we are able to so that I'm able to monitor it through the session. We'll have a special time allotted for it at the end, but I'll try and monitor it if there's anything that can be included in the conversation. Guy, great to have you on.
Thank you.
I mean, firstly, I feel it would be remiss sitting from where we are in Australia. You're based in California. It looks like it's been a big few weeks over there in regards to elections, COVID. Yep. What's the feeling? What's the impact on the local tech community?
Well, I think that America in general, well, at least 51% of it, is breathing a sigh of relief that, probably democracy won't die, although maybe we should wait till January 21st to really decide. If you look at the early Biden appointees, clearly none of them are his son or daughter, and they are qualified for their positions. They're relevant, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a good time. Having said that, and there's some good news about vaccines. There's 2 vaccines that have 90 or 95% efficacy. There's one more. The last one, the results are not quite as clear cut, but let's call it, let's be optimistic and say there are 3 vaccines. So, all of that is good news. But having said that, coronavirus is just exploding here. And it's not like you get approval for a vaccine on Monday and on Tuesday everybody takes it. On Wednesday, it's happy days are here again. So I think we're in for a rough, I don't know, 3 or 4, 5, 6 months, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But at least that there are vaccines. So that's a huge kind of kind of
made up our
development for
mind.
us. Yeah. So now, if we just, and I think if Australia and New Zealand has shown that it's not freaking rocket science. I mean, you just have to like wash your hands, don't go into bars and crowded places, and wear a mask. I mean, you know, how hard could that be? So yeah.
Do you think is? I mean,
Um,
look, we've been watching. The stock prices of tech companies just been going crazy. I mean, what's your view in terms of the impact of this crisis? I mean, I know it's a kind of a broad to say the tech sector, but broadly, do you think it is going to be a lasting impact? Do you think it's been positive? Do you think that
yeah.
it has what happens when the world does resume to normal in 12 months? Fingers crossed.
Well, I will tell you that I don't think there's anyone more surprised than me that the stock market has done so well for the past 4 years, because I mean, I'm not exactly a pessimist, but from the outside looking in, I would say so. The United States has been running amok for 4 years. And I can understand a blip upward because Biden is elected, but up to 10 days ago or so, like, what was the explanation for the stock market doing so good in the middle of a depression or recession and people are dying? Like, how do you put two and two together? I don't, if you want to make money in the stock market, just ask me what I'm doing and go opposite. I guarantee you will make money. So, and, I like to make another point though. Um, for entrepreneurs, and I would assume that many of your listeners are entrepreneurs, I would say that the level of the stock market has absolutely nothing to do with your business. So, if the stock market is booming, you're still 5 years away from getting into the market. If the stock market is tanking, it doesn't really matter because you're not a publicly traded company. Now, if it's tanking, it affects the psyche of investors because, well, and even that doesn't make sense, right? So let's say the economy is tanking, and so investments in early stage companies dry up, but that makes absolutely no sense because the investments you make in an early stage company today won't go public for 5 or 6 years. So what difference does it make what today's stock price is? None whatsoever. But a lot of it is just pure emotion. And I would say my experience is if you're an entrepreneur who is waiting for a really good stock market and a market for your product that's rising and there's no competition and no one else can do what you can do, and you have a world-class team, if that's what you're waiting for as an entrepreneur, you should just, stay at home, keep working for a large company, um, whatever, Commonwealth Bank, whatever. Just stay working, learn COBOL and Fortran, and stay in your job because you're not an entrepreneur.
I mean, well, I mean, look, perhaps one of the best examples of this is, companies like Zoom couldn't have been better placed to benefit from
Yeah.
this, to benefit from this. I mean, and one of the themes, witness the fact that we're doing this on Zoom rather than waiting
Right.
for you to come down and surf at Bondi from California, is the fact that there's been this remote working has become a major trend in new businesses, and that as people are trying to kind of collaborate online. I mean, I know that this has been a big thing for Canva, or from what I understand, right? I was looking
Yes.
at this. It's like 40 million people are logging on to Canva every month, which is a 25% increase over the last 4 months. I mean, this is insane. What do you think this is going to continue happening for businesses like Canva, or do you think it subsides? As I said, like it subsides once you get a vaccine.
We have modest goals. We would like every graphic element and design element in the world to be created with Canva. So there's still a lot of upside. How's that? But it's very easy to look backwards and say, yeah, of course it happened this way. But um, who knew? Who knew? And yes, Zoom and Canva, we're at the right place at the right time, right? Because in the old days, what I think Canva has done is democratize design. And so prior to the pandemic, in the undemocratic world of design, you either solicited bids from outside designers or you waited in the queue for your design department to be able to do your project, or you bought or rented Photoshop and you spent 6 months learning how to do anything. So that's the market that Canva entered into and democratized, because now you don't have to buy expensive software. You don't have to wait for the design department, and you don't have to get external agencies to do your work. You can do it by yourself. So that was already, that's the foundation of Canva. And then this pandemic comes along, and now collaboration at a distance is even more important. So now you can work with your team on Canva. You can share designs. You can see how everybody's reacting to design. You can edit designs. You can go through an approval process. You can also control an enterprise account so that, if you have 100,000 real estate brokers around the world, you can't just let them go hog wild picking which color, which font, which template, which digital assets. So all of that was perfect for collaboration. Also, the pandemic has forced us to learn to collaborate internally, because it's not like we're all going into the office without our masks and breathing all over each other. We're all working remotely too. So that has forced us to get up our internal collaboration game. So I think there's a lot of bad things that came out of the coronavirus, and we're not over it yet. But I think we'll look back and we'll say, wow, that really forced us to innovate, to get to the next curve, to develop new techniques, to figure out new ways of working and collaborating and communicating, that post coronavirus will remain in place, and I think make the design of graphics and communication much more efficient.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I totally agree with you. I'm thinking about. I'm interested to know about your relationship with Canva. Because obviously you've been doing this now for several years, and obviously there was a point, and you and I were chatting about this the other day. Like, there was a point at which you started a conversation with them, and you were kind of obviously must have been considering, hey, do I want to become the chief evangelist for this company? I'm really interested from the perspective of an investor and somebody who has been in the industry for many, many, many years. What was it that you saw? What was the thing where you were like, oh my, I really want to be associated with this company? What was the kind of
Okay, so I don't know if I want to burst your bubble, because I mean, you're probably hoping that I'm going to tell you, well, I looked at 10,000 pitches, and I reviewed so many business plans, and I met with so many CEOs, and I used all my judgment and my wisdom and my intelligence and my vision to pick out Canva. Well, let me tell you how it really went down. So 7 years ago, I was already active in social media, particularly Twitter. That was before Twitter was just for Russian bots. So I was very active in Twitter. And my theory in Twitter is that every tweet has a picture or a video. You have to visually communicate and get attention on Twitter. So I wanted a graphic with every tweet. So myself and Peg Fitzpatrick, who was working with me on my account, she found Canva, and she started making all my graphics with Canva. So Canva noticed that I was using Canva. And one day they tweeted to me, and I kind of put two and two together, and I said to Peg, isn't Canva what we use to make graphics? And she said, yes. I said, well, do you like it? And she said, yes. And I said, should I help them? And she said, yes. And that was the due diligence. That was it. That was it. It was it. Literally. I mean, obviously I met Cliff and Zach and Melanie at my house a few weeks later, which was just perfect timing. And I wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't, I was perfectly fat, dumb, and happy, just doing my thing. And Well, I call it Guy's golden touch. So Guy's golden touch is not that whatever I touch turns to gold. Guy's golden touch is whatever is gold Guy touches. And speaking as I think I'm highly qualified to claim that I can I understand secular evangelism. Um, I'll tell you something. It is very easy to evangelize something great, and it is very hard to evangelize shit. So the key here is to find, make, or affiliate with something that's great, because then evangelism is easy.
Yeah, and but I listen to that story, and I think to myself, it's a mark of incredible hustle on behalf of the Canva team to have
Oh yeah,
been,
absolutely.
attentive enough to know that you were using it, to get in touch with you. That's an impressive play by those
Well,
guys.
well, years later, I found out that they were just blown away that I responded. So I should have asked for more equity. Um, but that's a lesson for entrepreneurs that if you don't ask, you don't get. No guts, no glory. I mean, what if Mel and Cliff are sitting in Western Australia in Perth, and or wherever her mom's bedroom, is saying, "Oh, Guy will never respond to us." I mean, there you go. So you just never know. Now, I'm not telling you that, every one of you should now like direct message Barack Obama to be an advisor for you, and he's going to respond and say yes, because he asked Michelle, "Hey, Michelle, do you use this?" And Michelle says yes. Uh, but I mean, the probability is low, but the probability is zero if you don't ask. So you got to ask.
I that's it. Look, and obviously, like one of the things that you said, right? You jokingly said, modest goals of getting everybody to do anything design being with Canva. Like I've read that when they got started, they were actually trying to build a school yearbook business or something.
Yes.
And yet now like and honestly, like, okay, that's a good vision, but it's not the same vision as what they have now. Like, have you noticed, has I mean, in the time that you've been working with them, has the kind of the vision changed and become dramatically larger? Like, what are the kind
Well,
of points at which you've gone, this is an incredible business, and they are aiming for something huge?
okay. So, I can't tell you that I have dissected Melanie and Cliff's brains, okay? But the way the story goes is that Melanie and Cliff were at the University of Western Australia. I think that's the name of it. And she was teaching students how to use Illustrator and Photoshop. And she noticed how hard it was for them to use those products. And one of the things that was, really antiquated was the production of school yearbooks, because it was literally cutting and pasting with scissors and paper and, that kind of stuff. So that was a totally undemocratized. You had to work with a big school book company, who controlled everything. And so she thought that, surely there must be a better way than having to deal with this one centralized old school company, probably setting type by melting lead. And so that was the first application. And they noticed that people really loved creating their own school books. So they thought, well, if they like creating their own school yearbooks, then surely they would like to create their own flyers, business cards, presentations, and this is prior to social media really happening. But, and then as soon as social media happened, where everybody wanted graphics for Twitter and graphics for Facebook and, you know, albums and avatars and blah, 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 blah. Um, the story goes that they saw this greater need and greater need for the creation of graphics. So, but I will also tell you another truism that I've discovered through my career, which is the victor gets to reinvent the story any way you like. The loser is not visible, so you don't care. So, I will tell you a story that perfectly illustrates that. So if you ask Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, why he created eBay, he tells the story that his girlfriend at the time, now wife, was a toy collector. Okay, so she collected toys. And one of the toys was Pez dispenser, the candy dispenser. Pez's are to America what Tim Tams are to Australia. And anyway, so she wanted to sell her Pez dispensers online. And there was no way for her to do this. So her boyfriend created eBay so that people could buy Pez dispensers online. So that's the story they tell about the genesis of eBay. Now, I will tell you, I have firsthand knowledge of this, that is a total bullshit story. That that story was made up after the fact. And really what Pierre Omidyar wanted to do using microeconomic terms was that he wanted to see where the demand curve and the supply curve intersected. And where the demand curve and the supply curve intersect is the perfect market clearing price. But to get a perfect market clearing price, geography is a problem, because if you have a used printer in Palo Alto, California, and you have a buyer in Miami, Florida, how do you get that printer to Miami? How do you get the perfect market clearing efficient price where demand and supply curves cross? You can't do it. So what he wanted to do was to create a marketplace, an online marketplace, so that distance becomes less of a factor. So if the buyer is in Miami and the printer is in Palo Alto, eBay can make the clearing price happen. So that was his kind of microeconomic theory. But, it just took me 5 minutes to explain the microeconomic Keynesian theory of eBay. It's a much better story to say, oh, my girlfriend wanted to sell Pez dispensers. There was no way. So I created eBay.
This is, yeah, I do like that. I mean, was there something similar at Apple, at this same thing, that it had kind of come out of something a lot more? Yeah.
No, I have firsthand knowledge of that. So I have a podcast called Remarkable People, which if you're an entrepreneur, you have to listen to Remarkable People, because I've had Melanie on it. I've had Steve Wozniak. I've had Bob Cialdini, the father of influence, David Ocker, the father of branding. And so you have to listen to this podcast. So, the genesis of Apple truly is that Woz wanted a personal computer. And since there was no personal computer, he built the personal computer. And then come to find out, it wasn't just Woz who wanted a personal computer. Really, there are now literally tens of millions of people who want a personal computer. And so that is not such a different story from Melanie seeing that students were having a hard time with Adobe products. And so she saw the need to create, and she wanted herself to use a product that was much simpler and easier than the Adobe products. And so this leads me to another theory for venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. So I think many people, when they try to figure out, what's the genesis of great tech companies, often they ascribe it to, a large and growing market that everybody foresaw. And so, using this McKinsey analysis or an Accenture analysis or a Harvard Business School analysis, they saw that graphics were going to explode, or that, people who had mainframe computers and mini computers, but there were many more people who wanted their own computer. So Stephen Woz saw the pent-up demand for personal computers and built Apple, which is a total bullshit story. So basically, my theory is that two guys in a garage, two gals in a garage, or a guy and a gal in a spare room, which is the Canva story, they build the product that they want to use. And then lo and behold, knock on wood, luckily, they're not the only two people in the world who want it. And bada bing, bada bang, you have Google, you have Yahoo, you have Apple, you have Canva. That's the genesis of those companies. It's not because they saw a large and burgeoning market and it was like, all we need to do is get 1% of the people who want personal computers, because quite frankly, in 1976, nobody knew what a personal computer was.
Yeah, it's It's a really interesting point. But one of the things that I think you notice with all of these companies, right, is and when they and not at these, not in the spare room phase, not in the garage phase, but
Hmm.
kind of as they grow bigger. And anybody who is in Sydney and who's been to the Canva offices will know this. That it's the culture of the company is incredibly. It's a
Hmm.
very tight culture, and I'm going to just take a guess that it was true in Apple. What sort of impact do you think that this clear
Yeah.
values and culture has in creating the success of a company? Or do you think it is just this product, and if people love your product, it doesn't kind of matter?
Well, I think it's very hard to separate the two. That um, that's one of the problems with listening to people like me or reading business books, is that none of the stuff we spew out is truly scientific, right? I mean, if it was scientific, there would be a controlled experiment. We'd have two equally qualified founders, Melanie and Susan, equal capacity, equal market, equal technology. Everything's the same except one variable, and we're going to just test that variable. And there's a null hypothesis, and we're going to do a statistical analysis. Well, you could try to do that in business. I honestly don't know how you could ever do that, but so you have to give off the scientific rigor, because if you tried for scientific rigor, you would lose timing. So you can't have both. You either got to go for it and wing it and hope you're lucky, or you have to try science and be too late. So when you ask me this kind of question, it's hard to answer. So did the culture create the success, or the success create the culture? That that is a non-trivial question, because in a culture where everybody's cooperative and working and happy and trying to dent the universe, odds are you're going to create great products. On the other hand, if you have a great product and sales are exploding, probably you're going to have a great culture, because if things are exploding and things are doing well, then guess what? Then you have money to buy foosball, and you have money to like make lunches, and you have money to go on off sites, and you have money to do all these kind of things. But if your product sucks and you don't have money, you can't buy the free sushi and the massages at your desk. So that's why it's very hard. And the people, I think, need to be able to separate correlation from causation. And that's a great danger. When companies visit Silicon Valley, they get the Silicon Valley tour, right? So they go to Facebook, and they go onto the Facebook campus, and there's like Main Street down. Well, this is before the pandemic. There's Main Street down the Facebook campus. And there's like the place you get hamburgers, the place you get Thai food, the place you get barbecue. There's the place where you can learn woodworking. There's a print shop for making t-shirts, and there's all this. There's ping pong, volleyball, foosball. There's, the dentist comes onto the campus. You can have your car in the parking lot. They'll change the oil. And so you look at all that, you say, I went to Facebook. Facebook is so successful. And they have sushi, and they have foosball, and they have ping pong, and they have, the mechanic come, and they have the dentist come. So we're going to go back to Turkey, or we're going to go back to Australia or New Zealand or to South Korea, and we're going to do all that stuff. And then we're going to be like Facebook. It's not that simple. I mean, probably you'll go back and you'll just have a shitty company full of people playing foosball and eating sushi all day. So, you have to separate correlation from causation.
Okay, well, yeah, that's disheartening. I mean, at least I know that I can still get good at foosball, right?
Yeah, yeah.
One of the questions coming actually from the audience, Angelina actually did in fact ask something similar to this. What were the three things that allowed Canva to be successful vis-a-vis its competitors in your view, if it was not the foosball tables?
Well, I think, it was a clean slate approach, right? So they did not come from the direction of, well, we have this super powerful app in a box with a 500-page manual, and now we're going to convert it to a cloud-based system. And because, you know, uh, uh, that's kind of too much baggage to carry, right? Because you probably have a kind of mindset. If you have an application mindset, shrink wrapped on disks or CDs, if you have that, it's very hard to get to a cloud-based mindset where you're changing design types all the time, and you're adding all the time, and it's not a bunch of annual releases, but it's a release every few weeks. And there is no assumption of a printed manual, so it's a completely different mindset. So starting with a clean slate was one. Obviously, the vision of Melanie and Cliff to say, there must be a better way. It's like Woz saying, what I'm going to do is make a cheaper mainframe. That's not what he said. He did a completely different curve. So he was unencumbered by mini computers and mainframes, as Melanie was unencumbered by shrink wrap software. And so there's the clean slate, and there's a thing that, there must be a better way, which is different than saying, let's make what the existing product is slightly better. It's like you could harvest ice in the winter. You go to a frozen lake or pond, cut the lake or pond, harvest ice. But then the next curve is where you have an ice factory. Now you freeze water any city, any time of year. And then the next curve is the refrigerator curve. This is even better than the ice factory, because you didn't have to live close to the ice factory. You could have your own ice factory called a refrigerator. But let me just point out to you that none of the ice harvesters became ice factories, and none of the ice factories became refrigerators company. I'll tell you one more frightening story. So in 1975, an engineer at Kodak invented digital photography. Okay, so wrap your mind around that. Kodak in 1975 invented digital photography. Like, who listening to this right now is using a Kodak digital camera? Zero. All right. So now what happened? So imagine you're the person who has invented the digital camera at Kodak, and you go to your boss and you say, I have figured out a way. Nobody has to buy film anymore. Isn't that fantastic? You would get shot. I mean, what is your boss going to say? Hallelujah, man, you just created a way to ruin our business. So that's what happens. So, if imagine you're working at Adobe and you said to your boss, I have figured out a way where people don't have to buy Photoshop anymore. Well, I can't tell you that person's going to have a long career. So that's the key.
You've been working, obviously you worked very closely in the US tech sector and with a lot of these kind of top companies, top people, and now you have the privilege of working with the Canva guys. We've got a lot of questions coming in asking you about your views on the kind of difference in the culture between SF and Sydney, the difference in these kind of in the tech communities here, Europe, US. Do you have any kind of overarching views on that?
Well, I would not even limit this to Canva US or Canva Sydney versus US tech companies. I have been all over the world, and I have met entrepreneurs all over the world. And no one may agree with this, but I think that entrepreneurs all over the world are more similar than they are different. Now, you guys might be eating Vegemite and we might be eating couscous or something, but so there's some of that. But I will tell you that tech entrepreneurs are more similar than they're different. They view the world as half full, not half empty. They view the world as unlimited potential. They view the world as taking on the status quo. And so I can't tell you that, okay, so the culture is completely different in Sydney or America. I don't think it is. Nor Austin or Boston or maybe in Paris. Okay, maybe it's different in Paris because, in France, we're going to antagonize the French people right now, but they're all asleep, so it doesn't matter. So, maybe in France, your attitude is, well, if I fail, my family will be embarrassed for the next 4 generations. On the other hand, in France, you'd say, well, my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather fought with Napoleon, and you can live off that. So I mean, okay, maybe there's some cultural differences, but I got to tell you, man, including French entrepreneurs, I'll tell you, entrepreneurs are more similar than they are different.
Yeah. So Anna is asking a follow-up question about that. She's saying, what would you say are the kind of the traits that you think when you meet these people?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say that um, no matter where you are in the world, one thing is you should always hire people who are better than you at what you want them to do, right? So if you're Melanie and you hire a chief evangelist, your chief evangelist better be better at evangelizing than you are. And if you hire a CFO, your CFO better be better at finance than you are at finance. And just go down the line, because my theory is that A players hire A players, even better, A players hire A plus players. B players, on the other hand, they hire C players, and C players hire D players. And this leads us to pretty soon Z players, which is what we call in Silicon Valley the Bozo explosion. So what you have to do is always, it should be a source of pride. When you look around your room, if you're the CEO, if you look around your room, well, now we don't have room. If you look around your Zoom, for your weekly staff meeting, and you should be able to say that he's better than me at finance, she's better than me at marketing, she's better than me at operation, he's better than me at evangelism. It should be a great source of pride that everybody in the room is better than you at what they do than you, because then you have created a great team. I mean, you know, you could draw some pretty big contrast between that and the current administration in America, but we won't go down that rat hole. But I mean, that would be the key.
What's the? I have to know. Look, this is for me. I have to know what the bozo explosion is, because that just sounds like an
Well,
amazing phenomenon.
the Bozo explosion is when a company grows really rapidly and they don't keep up their hiring standards, right? So I'll tell you, one piece of data for the Bozo explosion happening is that all of a sudden there are lots of positions that require MBAs. If you work for a company and you see that a lot of positions require MBAs, let me tell you something, the Bozo explosion is happening. Um, so, generally speaking, it's when you are hiring so fast and so loose that any warm body with a room temperature IQ makes the cut. And the Bozo explosion leads to the layoff. It would be better to have a small, great team that is hampered by size than to have a team that you just threw bodies at the problem. Now, let me give you another corollary to that. My experience is, especially in a startup, that um, you should not be so obsessed with hiring quote unquote the proven person, because I think in many cases the proven person cannot adjust to a startup. So let's take an extreme example. Let's say that you need someone to run an engineering product, okay, or engineering project. And so you say to yourself, very intellectually valid, you say to yourself, well, we need a proven engineering manager. Let's get someone from Google or Microsoft or Apple or Facebook or Instagram, right? Because those people, they've built billion-dollar companies. They know how to scale, they know how to recruit, they know how to manage. Let's just get somebody from Google and bring them in to our startup where we have $1 million in seed capital and it's three of us sitting around a table that we bought at IKEA. I'm assuming you have IKEA in Australia. I don't know if you do, but anyway. So, but I might make now. Don't get me wrong. That person could be brilliant. That person could be perfect for you, et cetera, et cetera. Really has the context and the knowledge from working at Google or Microsoft or Apple. But I would also make the case that that so-called proven person who has been at one of those large companies for 10 years, in that 10 years has always worked for a company with very high brand awareness, with infinite money. He or she had a personal assistant who had a personal assistant. They had free sushi and foosball and all that. And they were always buying, not selling. People were begging Apple to do business with them, begging Microsoft, begging Facebook, begging Instagram. So their whole career was being selective and being able to choose from a lot of people, a lot of resources, a lot of things coming at. Now they go to a small startup. There's no brand awareness. There's no capital. And they're selling. They're not buying anymore. They're selling. They're begging people to put their product in. That's a whole different world, man. Completely, utterly different world.
Yeah, when my wife and I were building our first business together, one of the best pieces of wisdom I heard was, if you're hiring a sales guy, you should always hire a sales guy with an amazing track record at a shit company, not a shitty record at a great company, right? Because it's easy to sell Google. Selling for their
Yeah.
competitor, not so easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I
one of
hear
the
you.
one of the entrepreneurs has asked, what advice do you have for startups that are, struggling to focus because they have a tech solution that can solve many problems? Like, how do they choose
Yeah.
what problems to solve, and what ones they should pick?
Well, listen, first of all, um, that's a quality problem, right? So let's assume it's true as opposed to delusional. So that's a high quality problem. And um, I think, well, the reality is for most companies that your product is being rejected by everyone. So you're looking for one. And that happened to Macintosh, right? So Macintosh was rejected after introduction. No, the introduction was great. Don't get me wrong, but a couple years after introduction, we hit the wall. And so, you know, we thought it was a spreadsheet database and word processing machine. Come to find out, it's a desktop publishing machine. So I just want to address the 99% of the entrepreneurs out there that your problem is not going to be, oh my God, we have so many markets, we don't know which one to focus on. Your problem is going to be, holy shit, we're not succeeding in any market. What are we going to do? That's the problem you should worry about. Now, let's just say that you are the one out of 100 that has the opposite problem. Frankly, I don't know how to answer that question because I've never been in that situation. But um, I think to a large degree, the market will tell you, and I think it'll be pretty obvious, where you should go. I can't tell you that I've ever seen a case where you had a technology or product and it was so broadly applicable you just could not make up your mind. It's like, you know um
It's a
I
nice problem to have.
just it's a very, I mean, it's like, okay, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio, George Clooney, and Russell Crowe all asked me out. What should I do? Well, when you get to that point, I'm sure you'll figure it out.
um, there's a lot of people asking for different forecasts from you. So I'm gonna start
Yeah.
with your views on the future of work and workplace culture. Now that remote and hybrid models are here to stay,
Yes.
are they gonna stay home? Are they gonna what do you think that looks like?
I okay. So let me answer this question generally. I think that nobody has a clue, and and if I could build a case that many of us got so used to not having to commute, so used to using Zoom as an effective tool, so used to having a different kind of life that we're never going to go back, right? And there are some American companies who have said, okay, we decided you can work from home till, for the foreseeable future. I could also make the case that there's going to be a large group of people who say, oh my God, thank you, God. I want to send my kids off to school. I want to cook one meal for them a day, not three. I don't want to be worried about whether their Zoom works or not. I just want to take them, drop them off, go to work with adults, have adult conversations, not be worried about whether you ran out of Cheerios or, not be worried about, like, I don't know how to turn my Zoom camera on and the teacher says she can't see me. So there may be people who are just dying to get back to the office. I don't know. I really don't know. But somehow I find it's hard to imagine that we're going to go back to where we were. Um, like if you take something like conferences, so I understand the intellectual argument conferences. There's all the sort of off the conference floor interaction and meeting and all that, and how much better it is to make connections and blah blah blah. On the other hand, I gotta say, I mean, if I were a company, let's say that I was doing Guy's World once a year in Moscone, and 100,000 people come. Well, that's too much of a case. So let's say it's Guy's World and it's in Moscone and 10,000 people come and they paid $1,000 each. And the first night we had Sting have a concert, and then we took everybody to the 49er game, and blah blah blah, right? Okay, so that's the old world. In this new world, there's nothing in place. We don't rent Moscone, but we found a platform, and now instead of charging everybody $1,000 for a 2-day conference, we charge them $150 for a 2-day virtual conference. And lo and behold, instead of 10,000 people showing up, 100,000 people showed up. And we didn't have to pay Sting $250,000, and we didn't have to pay Guy to speak, and we didn't have to pay Gary Vee to speak, and we didn't have to pay Terry Bradshaw to speak, and we didn't have to pay, I don't know, Martha Stewart to speak. So our speaker fees went from 5 million to 500,000. We didn't have to feed people. We didn't have to get limos. We didn't have to get airplanes, and we reached more people. What's a better world? Um, that's not an obvious answer to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I mean, I'm going to summarize, because one of the questions we've got here is, when you have COVID that has heavily impacted a whole bunch of industries, is it a good
Yeah,
time to create startups, and where is investment? But if you listen
yeah.
to the way that you set up that last answer, effectively what you're saying is it's unclear. And do you think that means that investors now get spread across a number of different hypotheses when they're trying to work out what comes next?
Well, uh, that I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I'm not right in the middle of seed stage investing anymore. I will tell you, for an entrepreneur, though, I'll tell you some really good news for entrepreneurs. There really used to be an advantage to being in Silicon Valley, right? Because you could drive over to Kleiner Perkins, you could drive over to Sequoia, you could meet the people, you could play golf with them, you could have, granola with them in the morning, all that kind of stuff. You would see them at networking events and all that kind of stuff. So, if you're from Sydney, you got to fly over, and then you got to stay for months at a time, and you got to break into the Silicon Valley mafia and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, so there used to be an advantage to being in Silicon Valley, but guess what? Now, during this pandemic, where no one's having face-to-face pitches and meetings, it doesn't really matter where the ones and zeros at Zoom come from. You could be in Australia, you could be in Honolulu, you could be in Madagascar, you could be in Laos, Cambodia. I mean, so I could make the case that this is going to level and create a greater meritocracy for entrepreneurs, because nobody's checking the geographic location of your Zoom feed. And that's a good thing for entrepreneurs. That's an advantage for entrepreneurs. It's probably also an advantage for venture capitalists, because now you can truly pick from companies all around the world. The assumption that all the good companies are in Silicon Valley is flawed.
Mm. Guy, I've got to, now that people don't have to come to Silicon Valley, they don't have to DM you on Twitter to ask to stay on your spare bed for the weekend. So that's probably a positive.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got a couple of interesting questions about you and how you manage your career and time. One question here is, you do a very wide number of things. Like, how do you effectively manage between the time commitments that you have and the different kind of
Well,
business interests you have?
okay, so that assumes that I do manage it well, which is an assumption one should revisit. Um, but you know what? Listen, I'm 66 years old. Okay, so being the chief evangelist of Canva is purely outward focus. It's not like I have a team of evangelists. My job is to be out there, and now my job is to be in a little Zoom window. So. Um, uh, for me to do this conference, I got ready at my time, 4:45, to be on at 5 o'clock. That's very different than me flying to Melbourne to do a conference. I mean, that's so this a trip to Australia takes 4 days really, and to do this took it's going to take an hour and 15 minutes total. So it's easier. I can do more because of the pandemic. And now maybe I'm not as effective because in person I'm so much more dynamic that I would be a better evangelist. I would debate that, but um, so basically my life is evangelizing Canva and working on my podcast and surfing. Those are the three things I do the most. Because people from Canva might be on right now, I'm going to not tell you which one I do the most of. Oh God.
um, yeah, and just making sure that the house doesn't run out of Cheerios, right? That's also, I feel like that was off your list there.
Well, right before I got on, I was helping my wife vacuum the floor. I mean, that I would not be doing that in the Melbourne Conference Center. So
that's for sure. Look, here's one for you as we're kind of coming to the end. One of the earliest questions were, can you tell us please what your top books are? And I'm going to hand that to you.
Sure. Okay. So book number one is a book called If You Want to Write by Brenda Ueland, Ueland. It's obviously written for writers, but you could substitute any creative task for the word write. So if you want to program, if you want to market, if you want to sing, dance, if you want to make movies, whatever it is, if you want to write will unleash your creativity. It will help you overcome the negativity in your world, frequently caused by internal negativity. So that's book number one. Book number two is a book called Influence by Bob Cialdini, the person on Remarkable People that you should listen to. And he talks about social psychology, how to influence people. And every entrepreneur should read that book. Uh, the third book is a book called Absolute Value. And the gist of absolute value is that in the old days, there used to be the product adoption life cycle where the pioneers told the early adopters told the risk takers told the conservative people told, the laggards. So product flowed linearly. The gist of absolute value is that world doesn't exist anymore. And if you take an example of books, it used to be that you waited for the New York Times book review to review a book before you bought it and read it. Okay. That doesn't happen anymore. Now, a book goes on for sale. You go to Amazon's listing, you see that there are 54 and 5-star reviews. You click and it's in your basket or it's on your Kindle. You're not waiting for the New York Times to disseminate from high which books are the ones to read. So because information now is fast and furious and cheap and ubiquitous and pretty much unidentified from who it's coming, that changes marketing fundamentally. It changes. There is no guru of design that blessed Canva and said you should use Canva. It was because Trixie and Biff and Tom and Harry and Michael and Sashim and Mohammed, they somehow found Canva and they loved it and they used it. It's not because they read the Wall Street Journal and the Wall Street Journal said use Canva.
Now, I have to say, I think that you had a very modest interpretation of that. I actually think that was that the person was asking about what are Guy Kawasaki's best books. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds.
Oh, my best books.
Well, that was how I read it. That was definitely how I read that.
Oh, my best books. Well, for this audience, my best book is The Art of the Start 2.0. So that's the book where everything I know about entrepreneurship is in there. And that book, no shit, is kind of the de facto manual for starting a company in a lot of places in the world, a lot of schools. So The Art of the Start 2.0. My latest book is called Wise Guy. Wise Guy is a collection of stories of my life. It's not a memoir or an autobiography. It's really like, this is what happened to me and this is the lesson that I learned. So it's kind of like chicken soup for the soul. only all guys stories, if you're familiar with Chicken Soup for the Soul. And yeah, so Art of the Start 2.0, Wise Guy. And I'm telling you for the 15th time, you entrepreneurs, you need to listen to my podcast. I'm telling you, my podcast has the best list of guests anywhere in podcasting. I put my podcast up against anything from NPR.
Well, okay. Awesome. For those of you in Sydney who are streaming NPR, do away with it. You should be listening to Guy's podcast. Before we end, I know that a lot of people have got to go back from their lunch now. I want to just take a minute to talk about Canva's new initiative, Design for a Cause, which is a partnership with the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR.
Yeah. So,
do you want to talk about it, Guy? I'll hand over to you.
Well, I mean, listen. In the DNA of Canva is a great sense of social responsibility. So not just to make a buck, but to work and to make the world a better place. And this is one such program to work with the UN. And it is such a sincere desire of Melanie and Cliff to make the world a better place. Like a lot of people say that, okay, but this is really true about them, and it's true about me too. That my mantra for my life is to empower people, and yeah, so it is a great program. And God, if I were on top of things, I would just put the link out there, but you guys can provide the link, right? Because it's kind of rude for me to go searching for the link and type it right now. So.
I think it's fine. I think actually, so I think it's up until December 8th, and what you do is just to go on to Canva, and you should be able to find the details on the Canva site.
Yeah.
I mean, Guy,
we all, what one of the things I learned in life is that, everybody thinks you got to be an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs to dent the universe. It's not true. That truly the universe is dented because lots of people make a little bit of a dent. It's not because there's a Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. Everybody can make the world a better place. And that's the backbone of that Canva kind of work with the United Nations.
Awesome. Guy, it's been a really fun time. Very, very enjoyable to chat with you today. Thanks for joining us all the way from California. We look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And everybody be well. And remember, although you guys know better than we do, obviously, let's social distance, wash your hands, and wear a mask. I hope the people in America hear that and do that. So, because I need to get back to Sydney. I swear, Sydney, I tell you something, Sydney has the best muesli in the world. I love muesli. I don't do the whole Vegemite thing, but it has really great muesli. And there is a restaurant, the Bondi Beach Club or something like that on Bondi Beach. That is my favorite place in the world to write. The Bondi, they have like the world's greatest muesli with papaya. And it's like, oh my God, Bondi Beach that's God's country.
There we go. That's a good way to end. So, to summarize, hitty surf, but good muesli and a great place to write. Bondi Beach from Guy Kawasaki.
That's all I need. Yeah.
Thanks very much, mate. It's been a real pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.